This is Current Reflections, a production of Tribal College, Journal of American Indian Higher Education.
For this installment of Current Reflections, we are joined by TCU legend Dr. Jim Shanley. I'm Bradley Shreve. A member of the Fort Peck, Assinboine, and Sioux tribes, Shanley began his service to the tribal college movement in the early 1970s as an administrator at Untied Tribes Technical College, where he served as academic dean. He was later recruited as president of Standing Rock Community College, now Sitting Bull College, but eventually returned home where he served as president of Fort Peck Community College for over 28 years. In 1978, Dr. Shanley was serving as the president of AIHEC's board of directors when the organization shepherded the landmark Tribally Controlled Community Colleges Act through Congress and into law. A leader and organizer in AIHEC and the tribal college movement for over 4 decades, Dr. Shanley experienced it all in federal Indian policy, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So thanks for joining us, Dr. Shanley. We're honored to have you here to share your wisdom and to help us put into historical perspective what really feels like a seismic shift in policy with this new Trump administration.
Well, thank you, Brad. I'm very flattered and honored that you think of me and want to hear my observations about what's going on. And I'll do my best to try to give some insight into things. However, I do have to say that a lot of this is new to everyone, and it's really difficult to say what's going to happen in the long run.
Well, that kind of dovetails with my first question I wanted to ask, just kind of a general question. And basically that is, since Donald Trump succeeded to the presidency and began issuing executive orders, it has felt like American Indian education and really Indian country in general has been under attack. Certainly it has been chaotic, confusing, and difficult to process. So let me just begin by asking, how have you processed and made sense of all this? And do you think we're in uncharted territory?
Yes, we are in uncharted territory, and I've got a few observations I can make. Some of them are about a practical approach to dealing with some of these issues, and the others are largely philosophical. I am not familiar with the impact that the current administration has had on Indian affairs at this point in time. I've been watching the news, and I haven't seen anything specifically aimed at American Indians. The only mention that I've seen of American Indians was in reference to the Citizenship Act, where Indians were given citizenship and prior to that could not vote in the United States. And people were trying to use some aspects of that act as an excuse for the birthright issues with illegal immigrants. That's about the only reference that I've seen, through the national news in the past 40 days since Trump became president. However, I do have these kinds of observations. I talked to Larry Wetzel, who at one time was the chairman of my board when I was at Fort Peck Community College, and who was at one time the chairman of the Fort Peck, Assinboine, and Sioux tribes. And this was not long ago. And Larry said, well, you know, Jim, he said, you know what this reminds me of? And I said, what's that, Larry? He said, well, 30 years ago, you explained to our board of directors that the population was changing very rapidly in the United States, and that the U.S. was moving from a white-dominated society to the point where minorities were pretty much equal, and it was foreseeable in the future that minorities would overtake the white population in terms of numbers. And he said, you mentioned at that time that you didn't know what the hell was going to happen when that occurred, because there would be resistance to that happening in the United States because of some institutional racism that continues to exist and has existed for a long time. And he said, I've just been amazed, he said, because that thing that you said 30 years ago, he said, it's come to pass. And in thinking about that, you would have to understand that the roots of MAGA are lower middle class white males. They are the group that probably has felt most disenfranchised over the last 15 or 20 years of any group in the United States. And as a consequence, they want to turn the clock back. And of course, that's the huge MAGA thing: make America great again. And it means basically that you have some target groups. Obviously, Trump with his executive orders has had a series of target groups. All minorities are a target group, and being a minority, American Indians fall into that. His policies are misogynistic. They are against women's rights, not only in terms of women's bodies and abortion. They're against women's rights in terms of their ability for access to leadership. They're saying that the only good leader is a good white male leader. I mean, that's actually come out and it has been said. So you got racist, misogynist, and then there's some other red herrings that have been thrown in there, which is the anti-trans, anti-gay stuff. And one of the things overall, in terms of a lot of the tones of the executive orders, is that, hey, these people are con men. They're crooks. They're setting things up so that they can steal from this country. And the people that he appointed to work for him, I don't know where they drug those people out of, but they are very, very scary. I heard a comment on TV last night, which I think is accurate, because I also had thought that this was going to be the gist of it 2 or 3 weeks ago. A lot of the fluff that's been thrown up so far in this administration has been a red herring. It's been a red herring to disguise one of the main efforts that's going to take place here in the next month and a half. And the first step was taken last night by passing the Republican budget. The Republican budget is going to reduce government spending by, I don't know, some huge amount of money, $4 trillion. And it's going to increase tax breaks for the multi-rich, for the oligarchs in this country. So on one hand, they are going to be taking things away from the common people, and they're going to be giving it to the rich people. And so we're seeing an emerging authoritarian oligarchy in this country, and we really don't know where it's going to go. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, it seems that way, and I mean, that's why I asked about the uncharted territory, because I don't recall anything quite like this. So I hear what you're saying.
And part of the problem is, and I've been indoctrinated with the idea that the United States stands for freedom and liberty and justice for all the people in the world. And I'm a veteran, and I really have some personal stake in that sort of philosophy. There are a lot of people that are around that don't now. I did a little research, and it's not extensive, but when you look at the election, and if you look at the American Indian vote, although it can't be measured accurately because people don't register by ethnicity when they vote, the estimates are that 40% of American Indians voted for Trump. All right. And not only did 40% of American Indians vote for Trump, dozens and dozens of tribal leaders and tribal councils came out in open vocal support for Trump and the Republican agenda prior to the election. Now, that puts us in a real strange place, because it's like we looked for the enemy and here it's us. I know I live up on the northern reservation, Northern Plains reservation, and during the summertime I make it around. I get down to Cheyenne River and Standing Rock and Fort Berthold, and I have friends around that I visit with. And some of my best friends have told me that over the past couple of years, things politically have been so bad at home that they don't discuss politics when they go out in public, because there were too many rabid mega supporters on the reservation. There are a lot of American Indians that supported Trump and voted for him. So I'd say, one of the first things we need to do is, it has to be the old Michael Jackson man in the mirror thing. We have to look in the mirror. Who are we, and what are we as people trying to represent ourselves as? Do I have to go down and fight a mega tribal council in order to make them understand that an authoritarian government in the United States is going to be negative for their people? That's pretty frightening. In terms of the tribal colleges, I haven't heard anything, like I said, specifically about cuts that are being made. I do know that they're talking about doing away with the Department of Education. Now, the Department of Education has 3 or 4 higher ed programs that have been of crucial support for the tribal colleges. In fact, without Title III of the Higher Education Act, tribal colleges wouldn't exist. And essentially what they're saying is that's just going to be totally wiped out. Now, I have heard that there has been a considered launched attack against the historically Black colleges and universities. I have not, I don't know what that consists of or what they're doing at this time. I do know they're reducing the numbers of people in the federal government. So I wonder what's happening to those people that voted for this particular administration and work for the federal government that are now getting a job notice. The historically Black colleges and universities, they're, in terms of minorities, Black seem to be at the top of the line. I mean, it's a big skillet, and American Indians are in the skillet, but we're kind of a small fish at this point. That doesn't mean we won't fry with everyone else. It just means that nobody's really noticing us right at this point in time. So it would seem like the first strike is through the Department of Education. Now, nothing's been talked about that I know of about the Department of Interior or the Bureau of Indian Affairs. However, the governor of North Dakota is now the Secretary of the Department of Interior. Is he a friend to American Indian tribes? I don't know. I really, I know that the state government of North Dakota was pretty much stood against Standing Rock during the DAPL incident. Are there other kinds of things in terms of tribal sovereignty and other things that that we don't know? Yeah, there are. It's funny because the tribal college movement was kind of founded on the basis that we want freedom, but freedom has to start with the individual, and education is essential to it, because if you're ignorant, you can't be free. And so to erase ignorance, we have to move forward and educate our people. And then at that point, we need to start controlling our own affairs. And to some extent, I think the tribal colleges have really helped with that, because they've educated thousands and thousands and thousands of tribal reservation residents, and they're bound to have had an impact on governance and on every other area, from the health to the general welfare of the tribe. So, you know, it's really difficult, but how do we maintain those original values that fueled us now in face of this? I guess that's the big question. How do you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, let's step back here a little bit, because as I noted earlier, you know, you've seen as much as anyone. I mean, you've seen a lot of change over the years. I mean, you were you know, a tribal college movement leader when Jimmy Carter was president. So let's step back. And you know, when you were president of AIHEC's board in 1978, when the TCU Act became law, which is a truly landmark historical moment for tribal colleges, what was it like for tribal colleges before and after the passage of that act?
You know, before that act was passed, basically what we were trying to do at most of the tribal colleges was to make it through the year, to keep some wood stocked up for our furnaces. You know, we were teaching classes in granaries and old water systems and God knows what else. I mean, but we had this idea that if we were going to move from that point of helping people raise up out of ignorance and move towards freedom, that we could start at any place and we could do it on a one-to-one basis out in the garage if we needed to. And so in '78, that started, you know, that started helping to stabilize our support system. And, you know, as we moved up through the other presidents, Bill Clinton would probably be the landmark person. We really strengthened some of those support systems, and now, and I'm not saying that this is unfortunate, but probably the most of the tribal leadership at this point has never operated on this kind of a basis where you start from a philosophical system and you live that until the point where it's actually permeating down to people. They've entered into a place that have been somewhat like elementary and secondary schools in their community. It's like, hey, those are going to continue on forever in the same format, even if the format's screwed up. It's not doing the job that it should for the children, but that will continue for the next 40 or 50 years. And unfortunately, I think that the younger people that are in the tribal college movement, the leadership, never had the necessity, let's say, of really having to worry about where that next bowl of rice was coming from. Now, that's changed. We've hit the demarcation point at this point. You talk about the TCU Act when it became a law. Laws at this point, we are at the point in time where our citizens have to decide whether we are going to be a nation that's run by laws or whether we're going to be an authoritarian dictatorship run by an oligarchy. That is a very, very real thing, and it's happening to us right now. What are our options? The thing is, they're choosing to ignore laws. If there are laws that encompass assistance to tribal colleges, or that help American Indian tribes, these people think they can write it out within an executive order. They're ignoring the courts. They're ignoring Congress. Congress, of course, has been. We don't have enough time to talk about my feelings about Congress. So, but we do have, as I see it, there's two or three. We've got two or three options. One is Congress. Congress needs to stand up and save the United States. The second is that, barring that, the court system needs to stand up and save the United States. The third option is that at some point we're going to have to end up fighting and maybe dying for some of the things that we think are important. Now, is that going to happen? Well, the 40% of American Indians that voted for MAGA, will they do that? I don't know. We have to be pretty clear ourselves what we want and who we represent. Very, very difficult time. There's a lot of things I would like to see happen. A lot of it, we're just going to have to wait. Like I said, at this point, we're small fish in the frying pan. And we're going to have to see how the strategy moves forward. are we going to have support from other areas? Well, absolutely. But look at what they did to the people in Gaza. Gaza is now going to become Gaza Largo. I mean, come on, give me a break. And what about the Ukraine? Is that getting sold out to Putin as we sit? Very, very possibly. And that's antithetical to the type of military honor kinds of things that I thought this country stood for. Is there possible that we're going to have a lot of influence from Russia? You know, I really, I mean, I don't know what to say. I would hope not, but I can't see what's going to stop it at this point. So, you know, they're, like I said, they're up for debate at this point, not even for debate. People are going to have to be pretty adamant about saving a lot of things that are important. It's important for this country to also be aware of the other people in the world and to serve that leadership role and try to help those people that are poor and starving and that are being killed. Thousands and thousands of people have been killed in the Ukraine. What do they say? 40 or 50,000 people have been killed in Israel. I mean, the idea of young mothers and children being murdered just makes me sick. Do we think that that couldn't happen to our young mothers and children? Hey, folks, I hate to tell you, but it's happened in the past, and it hasn't been that long ago. It's been within the life of my grandmother. I mean, there are still people here that have direct connections to a remembrance of those times. So I don't know, Bradley. I don't know what else to say about any of this.
Jim Shanley served as a leader in the tribal college movement for over 4 decades. We'll be back with this installment of Current Reflections in just a moment.
Yate, this is Marvin Tom, the advertising coordinator for the Tribal College Journal. Since 1989, TCJ has earned a loyal following of readers who are passionate about American Indian education. Our dynamic media outlet reaches a diverse, wide-ranging market, including students, educators, and lawmakers. And here's the best part, TCJ offers a variety of reasonable price advertising options that can be placed in our magazine, on our website, or right here in our Current Reflection podcast. For more information, contact me at 970-764-4238 or at marvin@tribalcollegejournal.org. Yeah.
You're listening to Current Reflections, and I'm speaking with Dr. Jim Shanley on Trump 2.0 in historical perspective. You saw quite a bit of change between the 1970s, after the passage of the TCU Act, and through the 1980s. When Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980, how did things change for tribal colleges? What were some of the challenges that TCUs faced through the 1980s?
Well, it was a tight time, but the problem was that we didn't have the severe partisanship that we've had here in the last 15 or 20 years. And we could go to DC, and you could walk down the halls of Congress, and you could stop and you could talk to Republican congressmen and senators, and you could talk to Democratic. And if you could convince them that you had something that was worthwhile, that was going to help the United States, they'd support you. Now, the partisanship is so terrible. I mean, nothing's been, nothing's happened. There was a movement here last year led by several governors. I know it was led in North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, where both Republican governors and Republican and Democratic governors got together and they wanted to change some of the ways that preliminary elections are held. And what they wanted was so that you could run in a primary and you didn't have to declare a party. And the thing that would do, that would open the primaries up, then they would take the top 4 people that got elected in the primaries and they would run in the general election. But it would stop the partisan selection of candidates all the way through. And there was a whole number of states that joined in this idea. This, of course, it's long gone right now. I don't know, but hey, it's a possibility of curing some of the political problems in this country, and it came from some of the great political minds of the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, they've analyzed the electoral system to the point where they pinpointed it down to that. And because prior to this time, partisanship wasn't the big deal. Now it seems like worldwide, we're back to facing the old story about whether or not there's really such a thing as evil and whether it needs to be combated from a government standpoint.
You touched upon something there about the kind of that sort of ranked choice voting, and Alaska has a form of that. And so I don't know if you recall the last time that during one of the Senate races, actually the Trump endorsed candidate, got more Republican votes than Lisa Murkowski. But when they had the runoff election, Murkowski ended up winning the Senate seat for re-election in Alaska. And of course, she's a much more moderate. She's very supportive of Indian country. So I see what you're saying about how, you can kind of do away with some of that extreme partisanship through that. I think that's a better system. I mean,
unfortunately, the situation we find ourselves in right now, it's not really even partisanship. I mean, we're up against the authoritarian line versus the democratic line. And frankly, I'm disappointed in the way that the progressive people in this country, the Democrats, I'm disappointed in the way they've reacted. They've trivialized a lot of the issues that should have been dealt with. I'm not particularly politically correct, but in fact, Nancy would tell you that not to watch TV with me because I'm terribly not politically correct. But I don't know. It's pretty confusing.
Yeah. Well, let's jump ahead to another, looking back was I think in many ways, a really the Halcyon days for TCUs when Bill Clinton was elected in '92. I mean, the White House really seemed to get behind tribal colleges. We saw TCUs become land-grant institutions in 1994. There were various White House initiatives directed at TCUs, and Clinton himself met with tribal college leaders on various occasions. How did these developments translate into concrete change at the local TCU level? From your, memories, how, for example, did Fort Peck Community College evolve during those Clinton years?
Well, those were, those are stabilizing years. We were able to improve on the quality of the things that we were doing on a one-to-one basis with students. I think that's primarily how that affected it. And then we had kind of a lull there, although it wasn't all negative when George Bush, got elected in 2001, and but he, by and large, he didn't really bother tribal colleges much. And we were able to work with the bipartisan Congress to maintain a lot of the gains that we'd made with Clinton. Now, when Barack Obama came along, I never saw the Obama administration as being particularly helpful to tribal colleges. However, it was maybe the first administration that was very, very helpful to tribal governments and American Indian people as a whole. And those two administrations, and Biden, not much happened with Biden. The problem is, that a lot of our tribal college folks maybe became lulled into false sense of security going through those three administrations. We're talking almost 20 years here. And they got lulled into, and eventually the older people died off and younger people started taking over, which is the way things should be. But they weren't as concerned. They were lulled into this idea that, this is just going to continue on like this, and we aren't going to have to worry about this. And so we're going to take care of our local politics. And that's not the case now.
Well, let me just finish up here, by saying that, a lot of folks, of course, and rightfully so, are very worried. Given the erratic nature of this administration, there's a real concern about support for TCUs, but also about more basic fundamental issues like treaty rights and the government honoring its trust responsibility. We know that there have been eras in American history, such as allotment in the late 19th century or termination more recently in the 1950s, when these cornerstones of federal policy were in jeopardy. Or even worse, when we had a sitting president simply ignore Supreme Court rulings like Andrew Jackson did in the 1830s. So, do you think it's alarmist to reference such dark times in federal Indian policy? I mean, given your wealth of wisdom and experience, how do you see the next 4 years shaking out?
I'd like to be, like the fool on the hill, sit up and have my head spinning around and just watch what occurs over the next 4 years. I'm very frightened for the United States. If we become an authoritarian oligarchy, we're one step above Nazi Germany, and once they kill one person, it's going to move. The amount of murder will increase exponentially by the month. And people say, well, that's not going to happen here. Well, you don't know that. They didn't think it was really going to happen in Germany. And the problem is that some of the people that support that, the 40%, for example, that voted for that kind of thing, they're going to be denying it in the first place. I mean, they've already tried to send military transports down to Guantanamo. They're equating some some poor cat that come crawling across the Mexican border half starving. They're trying to equate him to Al Qaeda, you know. It's not. It's, believe me, things could get very bad. It could become existential. And, you know, like I've told some of my friends that are on the opposite side of the political spectrum of me, you know, well, you'll be satisfied as long as they put the ovens downwind from you, you know, because they seem to be able to rationalize destruction and the mean and the terrible things that they do to minorities and to poor people. So I'm just sitting here watching, Brad, and I hope that there's not much I can do at my age, but I've got a lot of kids and grandkids and relatives that I'm very concerned for.
Well, any other last words of any words of hope that you can offer here before we finish the interview?
I don't understand the strategy of the people that are in power right now. I really don't understand the strategy. It seems to me that there is some underlying strategy, and if we get to the point where we can figure that out, I think that it'll be easier to form good ideas about the way to move forward. I think that by and large, the majority of this people in this country are good, honorable people. I don't think they want to hurt other people. I don't think they want to hurt women and children and a lot of other people. They've been scared. People have scared them about particular things. It's scared them that their race is losing control politically just because of numbers. All of these things have to be ironed out. But by and large, I think that, you know, the big percentage of Americans are truly American. They really want to help the Ukrainians. They don't want to belong. They don't want Greenland and Canada and Panama to belong to the United States. But I don't have any way of verifying that. You know what they say: trust but verify. You know, I guess that's what you gotta do. You gotta I gotta trust that our people have been leading this world since 1945, and being a beacon for human rights and freedom. And I would hope that we would continue to be that. So I'm optimistic in that sense, but it's not that I think it's going to be an easy ride. I think it's going to be a fairly tough ride. And I think people need to really take a look in the mirror. And when you say, well, I voted this way because I wanted cheaper eggs and gas to cost less per gallon, you know, set your priorities on what's important in life. And that's about it.
I just want to thank you again for joining us and sharing your thoughts. And hopefully we're gonna get through this.
I hope, well, thank you for asking me. My thoughts may have no meaning at all. You know, they're just observations. So, other people may have other things that they're thinking about, and they may be also involved with things that are moving things ahead differently than what I think and know about. And, I'm all for that. I would press people to be active and proactive in terms of verifying what our personal and national priorities are.
Great. Well, hey, listen, you have a good rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us.
You bet. Thanks, Brad.
Current Reflections is a production of Tribal College, Journal of American Indian Higher Education. Thank you for listening.
Now da trachin in Sloan Shane Bashes Chain, but Andy Dashache Traban Dashanale. I am Marvin Tom, the subscription manager for the Tribal College Journal. Today, tribal colleges and universities are uplifting Native communities, and Tribal College Journal is their voice. So don't hesitate, subscribe to the Tribal College Journal today and help support American Indian higher education. For just $29, you will receive our quarterly publication plus the annual edition of TCJ Student, which features creative writing and art. It is as easy as a quick phone call or email. You can reach me at 970-764-4238 or at marvin@tribalcollegejournal.org. I look forward to hearing from you. AIHEC.